When people talk about the past, they usually imagine it as something solid, events stacked behind us like rooms in a long hallway. We assume it's still there somewhere, fixed and complete, even if we can't go back. But this is exactly where Richard Feynman would gently but relentlessly pull the rug out from under our intuition. Because when you look at the actual laws of physics, something deeply unsettling appears. Nowhere in those laws is there any special place reserved for the past. At the most fundamental level, the equations that govern motion, energy, and interaction don't care which way time is flowing. If you take a simple physical process, a collision of particles, a swinging pendulum, planets moving through space, and mathematically run it backward, the equations still work. Nothing breaks, nothing complains. Physics doesn't raise its hand and say, "That's impossible, that already happened." From the universe's point of view, both directions are equally valid. This is not a philosophical trick, it's a mathematical fact. The core rules of nature don't contain memory. They don't store yesterday. They don't preserve a record of what came before. At any given moment, the universe only knows its current state. Everything else we call the past is something we infer, not something physics carries with it. That alone should make you uncomfortable, because it means the universe is not keeping a diary. Feynman loved pointing out that if you want to know what happened yesterday, physics won't tell you directly. It can only tell you what is happening now. Any reference to the past comes from present conditions. Scratches on surfaces, patterns in light, arrangements of atoms, electrical states in your brain. All of it exists now. None of it requires the past to still exist. We feel the past is real because we remember it, but memory itself is a physical process happening in the present. Your brain is not replaying a stored movie from some cosmic archive. It's reconstructing a story based on its current configuration. Change that configuration, and the past changes with it. This creates a disturbing possibility. If the universe contained no records, no memories, no fossils, no photographs, no scars, there would be no physical difference between a universe with a long history and one that came into existence moments ago. Physics would see them as identical. The laws would run the same. The equations would not notice. That doesn't mean the past is an illusion in the casual sense. Things did happen. Causes led to effects. But once those effects no longer leave traces, the past has no physical presence. It doesn't sit behind us like a place we've left. It survives only insofar as the present still carries evidence of it. This reframes time in a way most people never consider. The past is not something you move away from. It is something that gradually disappears as evidence degrades, entropy increases, and order dissolves. What we call history is simply the part of the present that hasn't yet been erased. Psychologically, this hits hard. We carry guilt, pride, regret, nostalgia, as if the past itself is still exerting force on us. But physics suggests something sharper and more liberating. Only present structures can affect the present. The past cannot reach out and touch you. Only its remnants can. Feynman never used this idea to comfort people. He used it to clarify thinking. The universe doesn't care about what used to be. It doesn't preserve meaning automatically. If something matters, it must matter now, through action, memory, or consequence that still exists, and that leaves you with a sobering responsibility. If the laws of physics don't remember the past, then clinging to it is not obedience to reality. It's a habit of the mind. So here's the thought to sit with. The universe is not dragging yesterday behind you. It is recreating itself entirely in every moment. And what you carry forward is not the past itself, but the patterns you choose to keep alive right now. If the first idea unsettles us by suggesting that the past has no permanent physical storage, the next step pushes even deeper into what gives time its direction at all. This is where Richard Feynman would slow down, smile a little, and say something like, "Now here's the really strange part. Because while the fundamental laws of physics don't prefer a direction of time, our everyday experience absolutely does. Eggs break but never unbreak. Smoke spreads but never gathers itself back into a neat cloud. We grow older, not younger. So if the equations don't care, why do we? The answer sits in a single idea that quietly dominates the universe: entropy. Not as a vague notion of disorder, but as a statistical fact about how systems with many parts behave. When particles interact, there are vastly more ways for them to be disordered than ordered. That's not philosophy, it's arithmetic. Given enough freedom, systems overwhelmingly drift toward states that can be arranged in more possible ways. This is where the arrow of time comes from, not from the laws themselves, but from probability. The universe is not being pushed forward by time, it is falling forward into more likely configurations. The future is simply the direction in which disorder increases because that's where the numbers point. Now here's the critical insight. Entropy does not preserve the past. It actively erases it. Every moment that entropy increases, information about previous states becomes harder to recover. Heat spreads, energy dissipates, correlations fade. What once was a precise arrangement becomes smeared across countless degrees of freedom. The past doesn't vanish suddenly, it dissolves. This is why memory is fragile. This is why records decay. This is why history requires constant effort to preserve. The universe itself is not trying to remember, it is relentlessly mixing, spreading, and blurring. When you understand this, the past starts to look less like a solid foundation and more like a temporary pattern that happened to hold together for a while. The only reason yesterday feels real is because some information survived the statistical avalanche long enough to reach today. And even that survival is partial. Every memory you have is incomplete. Every historical account is lossy. Every record is a compression. The original state, the full richness of what actually happened, is gone, not hidden, not waiting to be rediscovered, gone in the same sense that a drop of ink is gone once it is diffused into a glass of water. Feynman emphasized that this isn't tragic or mystical, it's just how large systems behave, and we are large systems, warm, wet, noisy collections of particles fighting entropy just long enough to notice it happening. Psychologically, this explains something profound. We feel anxiety about time because we sense loss. But the loss is not moral or personal, it's statistical. The universe is not taking something away from you. It is doing exactly what it must do given its size and complexity. This also reframes regret. Regret assumes the past is still there in some actionable sense, that if you could reach back, you might change it. Physics offers no such handle. Once entropy has done its work, the detailed past is inaccessible. You can only act on W. Hat remains encoded now. That doesn't mean your actions don't matter. It means they matter precisely because they shape the present structures that will survive into the next moment. Meaning lives in what resists erasure, not in what has already been erased. So when people say the past defines you, physics quietly disagrees. Only the information that still exists defines you. Everything else is already statistically gone. And that leaves us with a sharp, almost uncomfortable conclusion. If you want something to matter, you must embody it now, because the universe is constantly forgetting, and it will not slow down to save what you fail to carry forward. Once you accept that entropy gives time its direction and quietly erases detailed records of what came before, the next question almost asks itself, if the past is being continuously dissolved, why does it feel so solid inside our minds? This is where Richard Feynman would carefully separate physical reality from psychological experience, because confusing the two is where most of our intuitions go wrong. Your sense of the past is not proof that the past still exists. It is evidence that some physical traces remain in the present. Memory is not a window you look through to see yesterday. It's a process happening right now, inside your brain, supported by molecules arranged in a particular way at this moment. When those arrangements change, memories change. When they disappear, so does the past they seem to contain. That distinction matters more than it sounds. In physics, information only exists if it is physically instantiated. A memory, a photograph, a fossil, a scar. All of these are present-day configurations of matter that correlate with earlier states. They are not the past itself. They are echoes that survived entropy long enough to reach now, and even those echoes are incomplete, distorted, and vulnerable. Feynman often pointed out that we like to imagine time as a film reel, with every frame stored somewhere, permanently. But the universe doesn't work like an archive. It works like a computation that keeps overwriting its own intermediate steps. Once the calculation moves on, the old values are not saved unless something explicitly preserves them, and preservation always costs energy and effort. Your brain is doing that preservation constantly, but imperfectly. Neurons fire, connections strengthen, chemical gradients shift. These processes are noisy. They degrade. They interfere with one another. That's why memory is reconstructive rather than replayed. Every time you remember something, you rebuild it using present information, not retrieve it intact from a vault. Psychologically, this is unsettling because it means certainty about the past is an illusion. You don't remember events as they were, you remember the last version of the memory you reconstructed. The confidence you feel does not come from accuracy. It comes from familiarity. From a physical perspective, this makes sense. The brain is not designed to preserve history, it is designed to predict what comes next. Memories are tools for anticipation, not records for truth. They exist to help you act in the present, not to honor what no longer exists. This explains why emotional experiences rewrite the past. Trauma, nostalgia, regret. These are not reactions to fixed historical facts. They are reactions to how present brain states interact with surviving traces. Change the state, and the past changes with it. Not symbolically, literally, in terms of the information that exists. Feynman would insist this doesn't make life meaningless, it makes it urgent. If the past had an independent, permanent existence, then your current choices would be footnotes. But if meaning only exists where information survives now, then what you do in this moment is everything. You are not adding chapters to a cosmic history book, you are shaping the only configuration that physically exists. Philosophically, this collapses a common excuse. I am the way I am because of the past. Physics replies, gently but firmly, that only what remains encoded now has causal power. The rest has already been erased by entropy. You are not chained to events that no longer exist, you are influenced by present structures that can still change. This also reframes responsibility. You cannot fix the past because there is nothing there to fix, but you can alter what survives forward. You can decide which patterns persist, which memories are reinforced, which habits are stabilized into the future. In that sense, the present is not a fleeting instant slipping away. It is the only place where reality is still editable. So the deeper lesson is not that the past doesn't exist, but that clinging to it is a misunderstanding of how the universe works. Meaning does not live behind you, it lives in what you choose to preserve, reinforce, and carry forward right now. Because in a universe that forgets, by default, what you deliberately remember and act upon becomes an act of creation. Once you follow this line of thinking far enough, you arrive at a point that makes many people uncomfortable. Causality itself is not what we intuitively believe it is. We like to imagine the past as something solid that pushes the present forward, like a hand on our back. But Richard Feynman would remind you that physics doesn't work with narratives, it works with states. The universe does not consult the past in order to decide what happens next. It simply evolves from the conditions that exist now. This is subtle but crucial. In every physical law we know, the equations don't contain the past as a thing. They contain the present configuration of the system. Momentum, energy, position, information. Whatever matters is already encoded in the current state. If something from yesterday still has influence, it's only because it left a trace that survived until now. No trace survives, and as far as physics is concerned, it never happened. That changes how we think about cause and effect. Cause is not an event buried in time. It is a structure that persists. Effect is not something that comes later. It is simply the next configuration. The flow feels directional because entropy keeps erasing details, not because the past is actively pushing the future forward. Psychologically, we reverse this. We tell stories. We say, this happened, therefore I am this way. But that's a narrative shortcut. What's really true is, this structure exists now, and it influences what comes next. The difference sounds minor, but it's the difference between being trapped by history and being shaped by the present. Think about habits. You don't repeat a behavior because it happened many times in the past. You repeat it because neural pathways exist now that make it easier to repeat. Break the structure, and the influence of the past vanishes with it. Physics agrees with psychology here in a surprisingly strict way. Feynman often emphasized that nature doesn't care about how things got to be the way they are. It only cares about what they are. The equations don't ask, "What was your childhood like?" They ask, "What is your current state?" Everything else is storytelling layered on top by human minds trying to make sense of change. This is where the idea that the past doesn't exist stops being poetic and becomes practical. If the past existed independently, it would have power regardless of what you do now. But it doesn't. Its power is conditional. It only exists insofar as you carry it forward. That applies not just to personal memory, but to civilizations. Cultures don't persist because history exists somewhere. They persist because practices, symbols, and institutions are actively maintained in the present. Stop maintaining them, and history dissolves faster than we like to admit. There's a quiet responsibility hidden in this idea. You are not a passenger being dragged along by time. You are a system constantly updating itself. Every thought you reinforce, every belief you rehearse, every action you repeat is a way of deciding which fragments of the past survive into the future. From a philosophical standpoint, this dismantles fatalism. You cannot appeal to the past as an unchangeable authority because physics does not recognize it as such. What exists is what is here now, and what exists now is still malleable. Feynman had a talent for making this feel liberating rather than frightening. The universe is not judging you based on what once was. It is responding to what is. That means clarity matters more than regret. Understanding matters more than nostalgia. Action matters more than explanation. So if there's something from the past you feel trapped by, ask a sharper question. Where is it physically encoded right now? And if it's encoded, can it be altered, weakened, or replaced? Because in a universe that only acknowledges the present, the most powerful thing you can do, take responsibility for the state you are in now, and deliberately choose what survives into the next moment. If you push this idea one step further, it starts to interfere with one of our most cherished assumptions, that memory itself proves the past is still there. We tend to think, "I remember it, therefore it exists," but Richard Feynman would cut straight through that logic. Memory is not the past preserved. Memory is a physical process happening now. A memory is a pattern in your brain, electrochemical arrangements, reinforced synapses, stored information. That's all it is. It's not a window looking backward in time. It's a structure existing in the present. When you recall something from childhood, you are not reaching into the past. You are activating a current configuration that was shaped by earlier events, but exists only now. This distinction matters deeply, because the moment you treat memory as the past itself, you give it authority it doesn't deserve. You begin to say, "This happened, so it defines me." But physics would never allow that shortcut. The only thing with causal power is the structure that exists at this moment. The past event has zero power on its own. In fact, memory is unreliable precisely because it is reconstructed every time it's recalled. Each act of remembering slightly rewires the memory. What you carry forward is not a preserved truth, but a living, changing model. The past doesn't survive intact. It mutates or disappears entirely. That should make you pause. If even your strongest memories are present-day constructions, then much of what you call who you are is less historical fact and more ongoing process. Identity is not something you inherit from time. It is something you continuously rebuild. Feynman loved pointing out that nature doesn't store records. There is no cosmic archive of what happened yesterday. If information is not physically maintained, it is gone. Permanently. The universe does not remember for you. It does not care. Only systems that actively preserve information can give the illusion of continuity. Psychologically, this can feel destabilizing. We want our suffering to be validated by permanence. We want our achievements to be guaranteed by history. But permanence is not a feature of reality. It's a fragile human invention. Everything that matters must be actively sustained or it fades. This insight quietly shifts responsibility back onto you. If the past does not exist except as a present structure, then healing is not about fixing the past. That's meaningless. Healing is about altering the structures that exist now, the habits, beliefs, emotional responses, and interpretations that are still physically active. The same is true for learning. You don't become intelligent by accumulating past knowledge like objects in a warehouse. You become intelligent by continuously reorganizing your current understanding. Knowledge not used, not connected, not refreshed, effectively vanishes. There is something empowering here if you're willing to accept it. You are not obligated to honor every memory simply because it exists. You are allowed to examine which patterns deserve to survive. You are allowed to let entropy do its job on the ones that no longer serve you. Feynman often warned against confusing the map with the territory. Memory is a map, useful but not sacred. When the map no longer matches reality, clinging to it becomes a form of self-deception. And this applies collectively as well. Societies don't repeat mistakes because the past forces them to. They repeat mistakes because current systems keep reproducing the same conditions. Change the structure, and history loses its grip. So when you say, the past made me this way, what you're really saying is, I am still carrying a structure that I haven't examined. That's not a sentence of fate. It's an invitation to awareness. Because in a universe that does not preserve the past, the only thing that gives it power is your willingness to keep rebuilding it. And once you realize that, you gain a rare freedom, the freedom to decide right now what deserves to continue and what finally gets to disappear. If you accept everything we've walked through so far, there's one unavoidable conclusion that sits quietly at the end of it all, and it's the one most people resist the hardest. If the past doesn't exist as a thing, if it survives only as fragile physical records and mental reconstructions, then the only place reality ever actually operates is right now. Not philosophically, physically. This is where Richard Feynman would stop being abstract and become almost uncomfortably practical. Physics does not reward nostalgia. It does not punish regret. The universe responds only to present conditions. Forces act now. Particles interact now. Information is processed now. Whatever meaning you assign to yesterday has no direct leverage over what happens next, unless it is encoded into something that exists in this moment. Think about how strange that is for the human mind. We live as if time is a long hallway we're dragging behind us, heavy with memories, mistakes, and identities. But from the universe's point of view, there is no hallway. There's just a constantly updating state. Each moment overwrites the last, except for the information that manages to persist. This reframes responsibility in a way that's both terrifying and liberating. You don't get to blame the past as an external force, but you also aren't imprisoned by it. What you call your history is really just a set of present-day structures, habits, neural pathways, emotional reflexes, beliefs that are still active, and anything that exists physically can be changed physically. That's not motivational talk, that's mechanics. If you want to change who you are, you don't argue with your memories, you alter your current behavior. If you want to escape an old pattern, you don't fight your childhood. You change the inputs and feedback loops operating now. Over time, the structure that once carried the past simply dissolves, not symbolically, literally. Feynman was deeply skeptical of explanations that sounded profound but had no operational meaning. So let's keep this grounded. If the past truly existed in any active sense, it would exert force. It would show up in equations. It would push back. But it doesn't. Only present configurations do. That means regret is not a property of time, it's a property of attention. Guilt is not proof of permanence, it's a signal that a current belief system is still running. Fear of repeating mistakes is not destiny, it's information that hasn't yet been reorganized. And here's the subtle part most people miss. Growth doesn't require erasing the past. It requires starving it. Structures that aren't reinforced decay. Memories not rehearsed weaken. Identities not acted upon lose coherence. This is entropy working in your favor. Once you see this, your relationship with time changes. You stop trying to fix what happened and start engineering what happens next. You stop asking who you were and start paying attention to what you are becoming through repeated action. Even meaning itself becomes dynamic. Meaning is not stored in events. It's generated by interpretation in the present. Two people can share the same past and live entirely different lives because meaning is not inherited. It's actively produced. This doesn't make life shallow. It makes it precise. It means every moment carries real weight, not because it lasts forever, but because it determines what survives into the next moment. And that's where the quiet power sits. Not in rewriting history, not in romanticizing memory, but in understanding that the universe gives you exactly one place to work from, and it's always now. So if there's one thing worth acting on after all this, it's simple and demanding. Stop negotiating with a past that no longer exists, and start shaping the only structure that does, your present state of mind, action, and attention. Because in a universe that never looks back, the future belongs entirely to what you choose to build next.